Okay, welcome back. This is our continuation of our discussion on space needs come January when we return. And we have with us some staff folks from the Joint Fiscal Office as well as our Office of Human Resources. So I'm going to start with you, Catherine, to kind of give the introduction, introduce our new Human Resources employee. Welcome, Arlene. So Catherine.
Sure. I'm Catherine Benham with the Joint Fiscal Office, and I work in the Pink Lady, which is next door for those of you, I think maybe all of you know that, across the parking lot. And Arlene Donovan, I want to welcome Arlene Donovan, who is the new Director of HR. It's a new position that was created, and she started in April. And anyway, it's wonderful to have her here. There's a lot of opportunity for her to find. Opportunities exist abound here in the HR arena.
You just got a little snippet of that before.
And Arlene is also in our, also in the Pink Lady. We actually moved some of our staff around internally to find her a place. And some of what I want to talk about is immediate. There's some immediate pressing needs, and then also long-term, which is maybe beyond the recommendations that you all are discussing. But if you think about the staff of the legislature and what is happening, we're adding a full-time person to our numbers. We're also replacing Dan Smith, for those of you who know him, who's an IT consultant, and we're replacing him either as an employee or a consultant. That was how we went out initially with him. He was a consultant, so he came occasionally, but wasn't in the office. But potentially we could have two new bodies that we have to find a location for. I know, and I'll let Arlene speak in a second to the HR discussion, but I would say I think that will be useful for us. I think the real question for you on the long term is, what is it, the staffing that you need as a legislative body? What do you want for the long term, and the vision about that? And I'm talking about really 5 to 10 years out. If you think about that, there are some pressing needs. Right now, we're short an office and possibly two, and we don't have a location for them. We share off, most of us share offices. The ones who don't share are in tiny spaces except for the head of the office. So it's a pressing need that needs to be resolved somehow. It can be resolved in different places. I would prefer to keep us all together wherever we end up, but we're not the only one. I think Ledge Council is also hiring people, and maybe I'll turn it over to Arlene to talk about the HR needs.
Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. So on the human resources side, as Catherine said, I'm also in the Pink Lady, but I do have an additional staff member who will be starting on Monday. She's an HR generalist. We also have some consulting work coming up with the NCSL, so I assume that when they're here working with us, they'll probably need some space as well. So ideally in the HR world, we would have the HR staff sitting together. We have some files. We're going to be centralizing some files. That work is coming shortly, and that will probably require some also larger file cabinets than what we have in the space right now. So that should be considered. And then the other thing, of course, is the accessibility for the staff. So in addition to being together, we also have to think about how accessible is human resources to the employees. We want to make sure that they're coming to a space that they're comfortable coming to and that is accessible to them. If it's too far away or not convenient, people may reconsider coming to the department, and that's something that obviously we would want to avoid. We also need to think about handicap accessibility. In an ideal world, we want it to be a place that is ADA accessible, with adequate parking for people who may have a little bit of difficulty getting into whichever building it is. So just some things that we need to think about. The other thing is that the HR space, we really do need individual offices, because a lot of the conversations that we have obviously are confidential, and we want them to remain confidential. And also the space would need to be locked. So it's important that the HR staff offices lock, my office locks. Otherwise, we have to clear our desk every time we get up and we leave the vicinity of the office, because we don't know who would be in there. Not that people are in there, but you never know, and we just want to mitigate any risk. So it's important that the offices lock as well. So just a few things to think about on the HR side.
So I have a question in terms of being accessible to the employees. Can you share with us who you're in your role as Director of Human Resources, who are the employees? It's legislators. And
And the staff. So we have the legislative staff who come in and meet with me. I've been here just 12 weeks, but it's definitely picking up. So they drop by my office. We have appointments sometimes, and also the members may come by and ask questions, or they call me on occasion as well. I was here at the end of the session, so I'm not sure what it will be like.
What it will
during
be
a
like.
complete session.
so my understanding is you're there for all legislators. You're there for our committee assistants, our lawyers, our joint fiscal office, and any interns that may be within our legislative council. So the question then becomes, should your office stay at joint fiscal in the Pink Lady? Should it stay at the Pink Lady? Is that accessible enough? Or should your office be within the State House? That's where my mind is going.
Right.
Questions? Butch and then Allison?
Thank you. So, Catherine, for the upcoming session, let's just speak to the upcoming session. Understanding that you have some long-term requests, but are you okay for the upcoming session to get you through?
No.
No.
We don't have a space for a new employee and possibly 2 new employees, and Dan Smith. But we do not have a location for them.
You need 2 new offices.
One definitely.
One definitely, one possibly, depending on Dan, how we place Dan Smith as an employee.
And what about your situation, Arlene, for this upcoming session?
So I would have the new employee who's starting on Monday. Right now, that person's going to be sitting very temporarily in the swing space on the 2nd floor of JFO between the conference room and.
It's an office space I was counting on using. So
Yeah.
between us, we have 2 definitely bodies and possibly 3 bodies that do not.
Don't have a space. And I also have some of the consulting work that will be starting in August. So
So,
they may need a landing spot.
just to be clear, who everybody's attached to, your JFO
Right.
and
Human resources.
your human resources, which is all new to us.
Yes.
It's separate from JFO.
Right.
Right.
Totally
Right.
separate.
Totally separate.
You just, you're there because now there's a spot for you.
Correct. Yes. They made a spot for me.
And with 2 people. You and an
We
assistant.
just don't want to blur the 2.
That's right.
pieces of
That's
Right.
right.
responsibility.
Yeah.
So Allison?
So this goes, of course, to what space will be freed up, who will move, again, to what the decisions that we need to make, because, and this is a total hypothetical, but if Ledge Council moves to unify itself and be all in one building at 2 Aiken, that does liberate the mezzanine offices where there could be spaces conceivably for HR, and JFO could reclaim its offices, because at the moment there are 6, I believe, Ledge Council in JFO's building in the Pink Lady, and the Green Lady might be able to house everybody, and I know Mike.
Michael?
So 4 Aiken is also available, and it would be perfect for JFO. It would be able to handle all of them, so JFO could move to 4 Aiken.
4 or 2. like,
4 or 2?
4 has no airflow.
Yeah, so, because we don't have a spatial need right now, we are hiring, but we have our spatial needs met. If you were going to move us to 2 Aiken, there's a long list of things that need to be done for Ledge Council to move to 2 Aiken. I doubt you'd be able to do that with January.
Yeah, we're gonna,
So JFO moving to 4 Aiken is probably more feasible than us moving to 2 Aiken.
Yeah, the amount of work that we have to-
Excuse us for giggling.
I'm sorry.
We'll make it, well, you know what, we're happy to try to figure out how to make things work. We do share offices, we can figure it out in the future. I know Ledge Council doesn't want to share offices, but we will work with you all to make it work for this, however we need to get through this. I mean, this is,
We really have to work together here. And I know Joe Asia's got some, he's tied up right now with a meeting that will end around 3:30, but he's got some the data, some information about Two Aiken, particularly the knob and tube wiring, as well as the airflow situation. So he can give us, bring us up to date on that. That may help a little bit with the timeframe, whether or not January is even feasible at this point, which it looks like it is not. Joe and then John.
Arlene and company are removed from. the
Joe, I
Pink
can hardly hear you.
Yeah, you gotta talk into the mic. too
If
for you
Arlene
to-
and company are removed from the Pink Lady, does that free up JFO's needed space?
yes, it does.
Arlene, there's no reason for you to actually be in the Pink Lady at the moment. From a short-term perspective, especially, you could be at 109, 133, doesn't really matter where you are. Although ideally, it would be that you're in the State House. But in the short term, to solve problems, if we had set you up in 109 or 133 State Street, you would have the adequate office space that you need. My understanding of those spaces is correct. Do you have any strong objections on a short-term basis being there?
So I suppose it would depend on how short-term is. And the other thing is, I'm not as familiar with the spaces that we're talking, I have been in all of them, but I've only been here for a short amount of time. So my biggest concern obviously is accessibility for the employees who drop by my office or come by my office. And again, just from experience where I worked before, we were moved out of the main area. It became very, very challenging for staff to come over. They actually decided on many occasions to not come over, which caused other kinds of issues. So depending on how accessible it is and how far it is, do they have to walk, you know, colder weather's coming, how long we're talking about, I think those types of things would have to be considered. So I'm not sure I can answer your question without being totally familiar about the space that we're talking about.
So I've got some blank in my mind. Allison, Stephen, and Janet. Oh, I'm sorry, John. I'm so used to calling him
I
Allison.
know we're both kind of wearing red.
John, Stephen, and Janet.
Remind me, the Pink Lady, is it air conditioned?
No,
No, we
And-
have
and
units in some of the windows, but not all.
And is it one of the buildings with really no ventilation then? Right? Is that right? Like
Window.
you open a window.
But in terms of winter time, it's heating, it's like Two Aiken, there's no ventilation system, right?
Right. I mean, it's the way buildings used to be.
Yeah, I know, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So Two Aiken would be a possibility to consider. Right?
Yeah, let's wait until we have Joe here for
Yeah.
some of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this in pertaining to this, Michael? So Michael, and then Stephen, and Janet.
I just want to note that the radiators in the Pink Lady were replaced because they were creating air quality issue with operation of the heating system. Radiators to make it for the same type of radiators that were replaced in the Pink Lady. So our staff who visited Two Aiken have a real concern that the radiators in Two Aiken will create the same type of air quality that had to be relieved. And they would like air quality testing of Two Aiken to ensure that that air quality issue does not persist in Two Aiken. Fresh your memory, what was happening is that there was off-gassing of chemicals, one of which was the carcinogen at higher than acceptable levels. For months, staff were complaining, having side effects, headaches, complaints going from early. Our staff are pretty concerned that they're being moved into similar space. They don't want to experience that.
So if I can mention what occurred at the Pink Lady. The Pink Lady is on the line from the heat plant that's behind 120 State Street. We were upgrading that heat plant. And the Pink Lady was at the end of that distribution line, which then created some of those issues. I believe those issues have been resolved as of 3 years ago.
They were resolved in the Pink Lady because it was a single pipe system, and not a double pipe system, right? So what was the chemical that was being used in the cleaning of the lines was not made for that type of system. I don't know what kind of system. it's being used.
But the man who knows.
So the
just
man
arrived.
that knows just walked in, but let Joe get assimilated here. I'm gonna go to Stephen and then Janet, and then Joe, you can get your head around whatever we're talking about, which was the steam line that for the Pink Lady, and then what is it for 2 Aiken as well?
Okay, Stephen Fry, PCS. I don't know, like, for.
No, you can't. You probably should come up and use my mic. Here, come up
That's
here.
part of the problem here.
Or here. Okay.
Hello, I'm kneeling, I'm doing field teach
You're
to
such a
the
supplement,
chair,
Steve.
yes. Knowing 2 and 4 Aiken very well, and I've never been to the Pink Lady. However, 4 Aiken has a very clear stainless steel handrail ramp that is extremely close to the Pink Lady from an accessibility standpoint. And it is, I just wanted to point that out, that there are many things about it that maybe aren't wonderful and amazing, but the one thing that is really very positive is the handicap or accessible entry on that upper level. And it's really close proximity to the staff at the Pink Lady and the staff at the legislature. It is certainly a categorically different type of location than 109 State Street and 133 from a proximity and just ease of getting in and out of. And there's also an accessible restroom in that space. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Janet.
So I'm gonna pass on the question after what Mike had brought up, and now that Joe's here.
Okay, give it to
has
Joe.
say. Yep,
So Joe, you're on the hot seat, so bring your chair up. So did Eric whisper to you what the conversation was? We were talking about what occurred at the Pink Lady when we were working on upgrading our heat plant. And then there was the issue of the Pink Lady being at the end of the line, and there was some real air quality issues. And now the concern is that that may also be occurring or would occur at 4 Aiken. I mean,
Or
2
both,
Aiken.
both, because 4
2
Aiken
Aiken.
had the other issue that Mike had mentioned before too. Because there were health issues in 4 Aiken, I think.
Well, that's the best density. But in terms of the steam line for the Pink Lady, there's concern that that would also occur because you had the same radiators at 2 Aiken as what was in the Pink Lady.
For the record, Joe Aja, BGS. What happened to the Pink Lady at the time when we rebuilt the heat plant in Montpelier was that the cleaning agents that are inside the water and to keep that from oxidizing. When it vaporizes, it was an issue, an irritant. And what we did not realize at the time is that we had 2 buildings. One of them was 1 Baldwin. I forget the second building. It was not 2 or 4 Aiken that had a single pipe steam system. So the single pipe steam system is you have a little whistle at the end of your radiators. So your steam comes into the radiator, it's slightly vented. And then if there's any condensate, it drains back inside the same line. And when that issue occurred, We did put in temporary vents. We vented them out the window until new radiators arrived, and we swapped it out and created a two-pipe system in one Baldwin. So that issue now is done away with. There are no issues. In the other building, we resolved it also. In 2 and 4 Aiken, it is supplied by steam. However, they're also a two-pipe system. So there's some of the cast iron radiators in 2 Aiken, and there's some regular radiators. They're still steam, but they look like conventional hot water radiators. So there's a mix.
So are they all two pipe or some of the,
They're all two-pipe systems, yes, in 2 and 4 Aiken. So you have a supply of steam coming in,
and then
and when
the
it
other pipe?
condensates, it drains back out. So it is a closed loop.
So the contaminant issue is not an issue.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Pardon?
No?
So the other question was, we've heard hearing testimony from JFO and Director of Human Resources in terms of space needs. And then, of course, 2 Aiken popped up. So the question then becomes, we know that 2 Aiken has knob and tube wiring, and there is no central air in 2 Aiken. So the question was asked, can some of that be or all of that be taken care of by the beginning of January? And I said, Joe has an answer to that.
By the beginning of January is no, I don't foresee that possible. So what you want to, if we're going to look at putting some type of air conditioning system into 2 Aiken, we would want to start there first, so we know what electrical needs would be required to extend that out. It could be as simple as just putting in window units in all of the rooms that can handle that. And then that would be the case of running an additional outlet that's dedicated to the window unit from the main panel to in each room to the window where that unit's going to go. But it really needs a complete overhaul because there, as mentioned, there's knob and tube in there. There's still some updated wiring, but it all should be looked at as a whole with people going in there. Presently, it is capable of handling regular office needs of running a copier, running power for computers, fans, lights, and the likes of that, but not necessarily more window units.
So if anyone should move in there come January, it really should be on a temporary basis. What I'm picking up from you, Joe, is there's no way you can do any of the wiring or any of the air conditioning or air ventilation, however you want to address it, because of time frame and contractors.
Yes, that's it. Funding is another issue. I don't know where the funding would come from, but we would have to do a design. So if we're looking at air conditioning in the building, it would be what type of air conditioning are we looking at? You know, if you're going to put a window air conditioning in, typically you're not getting any fresh air when you're putting in a window unit like that. So the fresh air would come from the window next to it if there's 2 windows in a room, or maybe around the gap of the air conditioner itself. But there is no supply and return ducted air to meet any type of an ASHRAE standard in that aspect. So if we were going to go to that level, the problem would be is how to get ductwork in and around that building, 3-story building, because of the plaster ceilings and walls that we have. It would take a while to go through there and do a design to see how much of that would be possible. And I would say it would take a better part of a year if we're going to do a ducted system for the amount of walls and ceilings that we would have to cut into. Some of them may have to be feathered out to allow for the ductwork to go in there, if possible at all, because of the way the structure of that building is. It is a post and beam style structure. So all that would have to be investigated first under a design to do that.
Could you use heat pumps?
The issue with heat pumps, you still need to distribute that if you're doing it room by room.
as opposed to the larger style units that go down the hallway and blow down the room and sort of slightly disperse. The issue with the heat pump is where to place the heat pumps. We have an imitation slate roof on 2 Aiken that sheds the snow and the ice quite well. It does build up a little bit before it lets go, or if you get a heavy snowstorm. So what would happen is on the north side, which is the parking lot side of the building, you would have to actually put the heat pumps out in the parking lot to miss any snow coming off the roof. On the south side, which is the side facing 133 State Street, you have a bank on that side, and there's no real area to do that. It would have to almost be close to 133 State Street itself. On the front, you have the hedges, and they'd have to go in front of the hedges. So that only leaves the one side on the west is between 2 and 4 Aiken. And that is where in the winter time, in the summertime and or year round, you park there. And also that is where we plow the snow. So that would be in the way of plowing some of the snow. So we have looked at this years ago. And it was after 2002 to 2008 when we renovated 133 State Street and provided air conditioning in that building. Is 2 Aiken is supplied steam-wise, heat-wise, through 133 State Street. Talking to my mechanical engineer, we've looked at a 2-pipe heating cooling system that we think could be brought from 133 State Street and use the chilled water that is in 133 State Street to cool 2 Aiken. And what that would be a fan coil unit in each room, similar to what you have both in the House and the Senate rooms, in the committee rooms. So you'd have a unit in there with a fan running and you'd have hot water or cold water. It's only a 2-pipe system. So at any given time, you can only have heating or cooling. But in a lot of our buildings, what we have done is, and you only have to worry, you typically worry about this in the swing seasons, is that being spring and fall, is that when you have those cold nights, you want some heat in the morning, we can provide the heat. And then in the afternoon, as it starts warming up, the chilled water can come on. So you can have that afternoon cooling when the, like in May, when the temperatures may rise, you could get that cooling during that period of time. At that point, with that type of a system, it still is not fresh air coming into the room. So what we'd have to do is they do make a ventilation system that goes through the fan coils, that you cut a hole in the wall, the exterior wall, and you can have a vent coming in to bring in that fresh air. The problem with that is I'm not sure how that would look on that building architecturally, but it could be done. But again, there's still plenty of fresh air coming in that building.
Alice?
Allison.
So Joe, when was the last time the Green Lady was renovated?
What counts?
Well,
Which century?
we moved a wall a while ago,
Right.
3 years ago. Before that,
So you haven't had a major
there
renovation.
has not been a major renovation to that place. We have painted and carpeted the place. We have put in a fire alarm system. That was because you have, those of you who have walked into the building, you walk in and you have that open center stairway. On the back side of the building, you also have another open stairway. And so because it's a 3-story building, to meet fire code, we have a variance by putting in the fire alarm with smoke detection. In case somebody falls asleep and whatnot, you get early notification. It's, calls the fire department, so you get out. So that's why they have not made us enclose the stairways.
Got it. And so when was the last time the Pink Lady was renovated?
Again, very similar. I think the last really, if you say major renovation, would have been making the 3rd floor level into office space.
So if this was and clearly 4 Aiken needs to be, I think 4 Aiken could be a great space if it was gutted and totally rethought. I mean, it's a great carriage house, so it could be fabulous space and maybe it could be all of HR, but I know there are concerns about the health issues. But it strikes me that 2 Aiken or the Green Lady is is a great opportunity, but needs a major renovation. I mean, it does strike me that it needs, and if Ledge Council wanted to own that as a space for them all to be united, it would take a while to do that, a design, a renovation. It needs to be weatherized. It's not weatherized right now, right?
It has in the early 80s, there was some blown in insulation done to the walls and the attic.
Right.
It probably has settled in, could use it. We just replaced the casement windows. Those are all new casement windows in there. The double hungs, after working with historic preservation, they did allow us to replace the casements, but the double hungs, we would have to have them sent out and refurbished and put back in. They would not, cannot replace them. But again, if you're looking for a major renovation, what
That'll be
that really
time.
means, and then what you're looking at is a lot of those walls are structural walls. And so it's not like you can just open it up and make
Right,
larger
right.
spaces.
I'm just trying to get my head around, is it an appropriate thing for us to be? I mean, it's obviously short-term. Some people could be there but it also strikes me that as we talk about the State House expansion, it needs to be part of that thoughtful real renovation and redesign whenever we do that. Whenever that is, in 2, 3, 4 years, because it sounds like it needs that much work, and the picnic lady may need the same in whatever we do additionally here, and that we really have to start thinking about that as our complex are those 2 buildings in addition to the State House.
And when you start doing that, you have to be careful how much you're going to renovate it, because you'll be looking at a sprinkler system. And then possibly, if you spend too much money on it, you put in an elevator in the place.
Right.
Fire safety will require that code wise. So those are some of the things that you'd be looking at. However, I think with the number of structural walls that I'm aware of, you're not really moving the walls that much. So it's more of carpet and paint.
Right. And of course, 4A 2 could be totally renovated to really conceivably be pretty great.
I'm gonna go to Joe and then you, Michael, okay?
When is BGS supposed to evacuate?
We're gone.
You're gone.
I think it's been raked out. I don't think it's been vacuumed yet. Oh, really? Okay, well,
Keeping this discussion short-term and on Alice's bullet points, human resources could move in there. I don't know if you were privy to the conversation about what Arlene's actual needs were. But assuming you need 2 offices in a conference room,
You got it right there
You
with the
got it right there.
commissioner's office.
you're done.
you got more than enough.
Okay.
And it's handicapped accessible.
JFO in that instance has the space it needs for its expansion. That takes care of Alice's bullet point number 3. Ledge Council and operations. I don't think there's any hammers that are going to be dropping between now and say July of 2022. Is that safe to say?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean,
So-
I still would need to say yes. I would need to know what your program is to go in there. So, and that means are the rooms, they're okay as they are.
I'm
and
not
we're just-
talking anymore about 2 Aiken.
Okay.
I'm now talking about the space that Ledge Council currently occupies, the annex and the Pink Lady. No hammers are going to be falling for July of 2022 in those spaces, if I have read everything correctly so far.
That's true because there's no plans that I'm aware of to do anything to those spaces. So I have no design, nothing.
So there's no rational reason for Ledge Council or operations to move before that point. Would that be safe to say?
I don't get to say either way because we vacated 2 Aiken, so you get to use it, but we're not for the HVAC system that we were at one point in time and still might be looking for space for a summer boiler. We will not be renovating by that date. Yes.
I think that takes care of bullet point number 2. we assume safely that Ledge Council and operations do not have to move from where they are on a short-term basis. Which brings us back essentially to the lounge, which I think we've talked about already. And the magical question, where the hell are we gonna hang our coats?
So we got a couple more comments, Ruth and then Butch.
About the distinction between the status or the status between 2 and 4 again. You suggested that JFO move it to 4 again.
No, 2.
No, he said
I
four.
think he said
No, he
four.
didn't.
4, you meant,
Said-
did you mean 4 or 2?
No, no.
The carriage house.
Michael
yeah.
Brady said it, so I wasn't sure if the reason you said it, maybe I should be asking you, is because you know that that building is in better shape than 2 Aiken, or was it just a suggestion you were throwing out there? Is there a difference between the status in terms of the health and safety of those 2 buildings?
Or Aiken has air conditioning, right?
It does have heat pumps and it does have air conditioning, yes. Only the second floor on Baldwin Street is accessible. That's the one where the ramp is, that one section. Yes.
Or Aiken also has a bunch of offices, which is what Catherine, she referenced. Their staff having their, so a bunch of their offices, also space. It's also been recarpeted fairly recently. As opposed to Aiken, which is got some space that linoleum and wood carpet.
So it has air conditioning, does it have the wire to?
Knob and tube issue.
Or
Over the years that has renovated, when I started in '83, the lower left side was a carpenter shop, the right-hand side was building general grounds crew. The upstairs, where it's handicap accessible right now, was the paint shop, and the back area was unfinished. So I want to say, over the years that we have renovated that space in piecemeal, I believe electrically, we're okay. A fire alarm system is being installed right now. We're extending it from 6 Baldwin
Okay,
because there is that link.
okay. And you moved out of 2 Aiken, whoever was in 4 Aiken has been.
4 Aiken, 75% of it is vacant.
So if we don't put people in there, those buildings will just be vacant until we
Correct.
decide to use them.
Mhm.
Okay. So I would say that one thing is, if we are going to move anything, if we're going to move HR, you should get to look at the buildings and see which one you would prefer, given what we just heard and maybe other factors about your needs instead of.
2 Aiken would be more appropriate.
Well, it sounds like
Way
4
more
Aiken might.
Yeah, it'd be more
Way
appropriate
more
than 4
appropriate.
Aiken. 4
Well,
Aiken is,
I don't know. I
It's
think
kind of-
maybe you should be able to look at them and see what would fit your needs best.
I've seen 2. I think 4 wasn't open, I think. they had to go in.
2 Aiken Commissioner's Office Conference Room. That area is more appropriate and it's handicapped accessible.
2 Aiken definitely had space, I
Yeah,
remember.
it's your first, the first one. But again, whatever you do at 2 Aiken, it's only temporary. Because in order to move anyone in there permanently, even if you move someone in there, and then you start the electrical and air circulation project, you can't have anybody in the building during that time. So what goes through my mind is if 2 Aiken is available for HR, if you'd be on the floor where the commissioner's office was, the deputy commissioner, and you have that large conference room right there, handicapped accessible. It's a little further from the State House, but then when and if, or when, there's renovations done to upgrade the electrical, upgrade the airflow, air conditioning. That would get done during the summer and fall. You could move into the State House at that point, because we're not here. So there'd be room in the State House for your operation. That's what's going through my mind for the construction season. In your construction season, you'd be able to do that in the summer and fall and be ready for January of 2023? You think?
Say yes, Joe.
No, I just don't know.
Well,
It depends how much of the renovation it would take place. If it's
Okay.
the electrical, I think that would go pretty quick. If it's just fan coil units, we got to run the piping and some of it will have to be embedded in the walls. It would take a full summer at best. I need funding and I would need to put a plan together first to pull all this off. And I do want to say the caveat at 4 Aiken is that ground floor, old ground shop area. The floor does have to be sealed.
yeah,
There's
right.
benzene. There's
Yeah,
benzene.
we do have some because of the gas that they had in there for the lawnmower.
Whoops.
Yeah, I'm
I
a
just
little
wanted to-
frustrated.
One more comment.
Yeah.
Responding to what Joe said. It does seem like we still have a problem in the State House with space. Because we don't have a place for the co-room, we don't have the 6 committee rooms we needed. And unfortunately, in my mind, we made the decision to not use the extra space for committee room, the other buildings for committee room. So it still needs to be on the table what we're doing with
Yeah,
the office space in the back, the mezzanine and the, whatever it's called, that space. Because we don't have enough rooms. And if the LG's office is off limits and the governor's office is off limits.
Yeah.
And everything else is off limit. We've made so many things off limits.
right.
And so many things that we're not gonna do, we don't have enough space.
Yeah.
And we voted to not use the space that we were offered, so.
Well, we
it's
haven't
really-
voted on that. We
Yeah, we
haven't
did.
voted
We
to not,
voted 2 weeks ago to not use.
oh,
to not
that
put
space,
committees
but,
in other places.
right, but
So-
2 and 4 Aiken are still,
We can't
Definitely
keep
on the
taking
table.
things off the table and saying, we're not gonna do that, we're
Right.
not gonna do that, we're not gonna use that, we're not gonna have that conversation, because we just don't have enough space.
agreed.
Butch?
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated. It seems to me I never realized that 2 and 4 Aiken were falling to the ground. And that's just about what I've heard from everybody on the other side of this table in the last couple of meetings.
That they've
The
done.
buildings are in terrible shape. Yeah, we
Yeah.
ran the entire state government operation for buildings and general services out of 2 Aiken. And that's a big deal. And it worked for them. They've been running computers, they've been running air conditioners over at 2 Aiken. The commissioner's office in 2 Aiken is palatial. Absolutely palatial compared to other offices within state government. And for us to just sit here and say, and listen to people say that building, and I've been interpreting it as building's a piece of junk, it's wrong.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful old building. And it with some work, it will get us by for the immediate future. And that's what I'm concerned with today. And I agree with Senator Hardy that we have some immediate future plans that we have to deal with. And we as a group of people did not put ourselves into this situation. We've been forced into this situation. So we have to make do with what we've got. We got to be Vermonters. We have to make do with what we got, even if we have to fix an old rickety wagon wheel. We're going to have to fix that wagon wheel. And this is where I'm coming from on this. And we all need to be flexible.
Right.
You know, for now, we just need to be flexible. Don't want to put anybody in a dangerous spot at all, but we need to be a little bit flexible and be careful while we're doing it. So, we were not going to have the best office space we never have the best office space in the world here. Never. If we did, this building would have been renovated 20 years ago. But because of the way we do business here, we fix other people's stuff before we take care of ourselves. That's my frustration.
Michael?
So first, I want to note that our staff did tour 2 Aiken, and the staff that provided feedback said, first, we don't want to move, but if we're going to have to move, this is probably our best option. Several of them said, it's got interesting space, it's got a lot of space, it's got good light, a little bit far away, but they can deal with that. But they noted, pretty much everyone noted that it needed to be painted and it needed new color and new linoleum places. Staff that were in the Pink Lady during the off-gassing were very concerned about the radiators because because they experienced the health problems. So that's a little bit of BGS having to deal with the repercussions of that issue, right? So staff were concerned about that. All they asked for is some air quality testing. So that's, the air conditioning is probably your biggest thing, but the air conditioning isn't really the problem, it's the electrical. Because we would do window units, and everyone said window units were a possibility, but you can't hang window units in and out into the building the way that it's set up right now. They have 3, and that's because they retrofitted 3 outlets, right? And so I woke up this morning and it was 99% humidity with 65 degrees outside. I was sweating by the time I walked my dog down the driveway. Imagine what it's going to be like in an old building on the 2nd and 3rd floor that doesn't have air conditioning. Our staff that ask for air conditioning are the staff that are on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the Pink Lady Parade. They have to do it. So they said it's necessary. The one thing that I haven't noted, I don't know how it plays into getting anybody into that building by 10. Most of our furniture is the old Department of Corrections wood furniture that is made for our offices. It's not gonna fit in the offices over at 280. Some of them might. You know, you can take Brent's furniture, you can take David's furniture, Shell's furniture. My thing, not gonna move. Right? It's not going to fit in any office over there. There are similar gyms. You're going to have to get us new furniture to go in there. And I don't know what the supply chain is like right now for that. Or are you just expecting us to go up to surplus? Which is what we have done because we have made do, because we have had to do what we needed to do in our office space since I've been there. We created cubicles. We repainted the building. We got the carpet in place. It wasn't because BGS said you should do it. It's because we insisted on it. Because we made do because we're in a small corridor that is utility piping infrastructure for the entire building. So we have made. And we have taken what we could take to make that a space, a better space. And so we don't think 2 Aiken is falling down. We don't think it's the worst building in the world. It has potential. But we would like certain things done because we have made do since we have made.
So thank you for that, Michael. Thank you for that response. It's a very positive response. And the most concerning thing that I heard with what you just said is we need to do air quality testing in the Green Lady or Two Ball and I agree with you with that. I also listened to Joe say earlier that that's currently an existing 2-pipe system. So we have to, I would have some confidence that if we did air quality testing in that building, it would pass. But without the data, and I agree with you on that, we would need that. And I appreciate your efforts up in the mezzanine. So thank you.
Stephen and then Allison.
To the not so, actually, it's a nice warm seat. So, Mike, since we are in the middle of, well, we've left 2 and 4 Aiken, we're in the process of planning and facilitating our move to 133 State Street. We have been in constant contact with furniture vendors and very clearly understanding of timelines, availability of product. And I can assure you unequivocally that there are no issues with the ordering of furniture, the specifying of furniture, things of that nature. So I just don't want that to be an impediment to doing perhaps temporary or medium-term changes to facilitate the needs of the JFO and the HR department of Ledge, that it certainly is foreseeable, it is possible within the existing vendor climate. So I just wanted to share that. I feel very positive about that.
Great, thank you.
Oh, that means we want to come see your new desk and chair. Because he's very positive.
Just have one right now.
So Allison and then John.
So would somebody be kind enough to remind me of the capacity, the number of offices in the Green Lady?
2 Aiken can hold about 25, 26 offices.
So and 4 Aiken could have how many offices? The carriage.
4 Aiken needs to be gutted.
It does. And it
So
could be
that
so
one
great.
that one's down the road.
Right.
I think the more immediate one is really looking at 2 Aiken, dealing with knob and tube
Right.
and dealing with air circulation.
So
And we know that if we do that, it's not going to be done by January. So the conversation of who's going to go to 2 Aiken will continue. We'll work with Ledge Council members, folks, to if that is the decision in the future to move our lawyers there, we should be working with them for their needs to make sure that they're in a safe environment. And in order to do that, we need to invest in 2 Aiken.
Right.
And we need to be clear about that and that it will not be occurring by January.
So may I just finish? Because my thought was, we need a short-term and long-term plan for the Green Lady. That's clear. And however, the short-term, the short-term is they'll be moving in November, December. If that was going to be a Ledge Council move for short-term, they're not going to need air conditioning for the first 5 months, 4 months.
Can I
whatever.
interject? I have dealt enough with BGS and moving people that you're not going to move someone on a temporary basis and then try to move them someplace else 4 months later to do renovations, because you're not going to have the space to put them. I mean, that's what
Okay,
you
so-
got to think about. Is it worth it to move people in there? A lot of folks, maybe human resources with a couple people, but to move 20 people into 2 Aiken at this point in November or December, when you need some renovation and upgrading their electrical and upgrading their air conditioning, and then move 20 people out and find a place for them, that's the logistics.
So I think that is what I like about that is, first of all, the thing I sort of like about the Green Lady is that it would unite all of Ledge Council. It has the capability of that with a major renovation, with further work on its upgrade on electrical. It has the capacity to actually unite and serve Ledge Council in a way they could design and they could invest in and they could own. I mean, that would be theirs and that they could create and design for them. And so I like that, part of me thinks that that's a very smart use of that space, because it's the only space at the moment until we do the expansion that would have them all together in one space, which from what we've heard, the testimony we've heard, other than the crowd that's in the Pink Lady right now, that editing would like to stay with the lawyers. I mean, it has the ability to have everybody together in one place. As long as you get to be involved in the renovation and the decision about what that building ends up being. So I agree. I think that's a good solution. The problem is we have to go back to Ruth's point, and our point is we then need to, if that is going to be taken off the table, moving any of Ledge Council, we are a little stuck because we need some flexibility, and we need to all be thinking flexibly about how we're going to work in this footprint for the next year. And if we are going to flexibly use a couple of the Senate rooms, we're going to need place for committee assistants to have cubicles and spaces. I know the staff, at some point, I would really like to hear the staff's solutions because they have solutions that they have worked out. I would love to hear them, and I'd love to have us actually be open to hearing the staff solutions because they have some thoughtful ideas that I think we should be opening to listening to. And I think that, you know, it's just to go back to, if we all want to be in this same building, we're going to have to rethink the way we do things a little bit. And this, if Ledge Council isn't moving, we maybe need to keep one of these rooms or two of these rooms or all three of them as flex spaces and as a coat room, as a whatever. I would love to hear, because I hear that there's a solution for a lot of these things without our having to actually give up the use of some of these bigger rooms. So at some point, I'd love to hear that because I think we should hear what the staff have thought of. Because evidently they have a thought, and it would be interesting for us to hear that.
So I don't want to get confused in terms of looking, in terms of how we're coming back into the building come January in the COVID world, still some way, which is a little different than our long-term plan of space. I don't want to get that enmeshed. Just because some of these bigger rooms, 9, 10, 11, the lounge, Ethan Allen, are converted to a committee room, that's temporary. That's all interim. The next session in 2023, we could all be back in our own committee rooms, which is where we should be, and open up these rooms again. But we also need to talk separate from January in terms of space needs as we move forward as a legislative body. So I don't want to get it immersed or meshed together in terms of what do we do in January versus the long term. Not one and the same. John.
I wanted to, you kind of covered some of the points I was going to make. Well, first of all, I'm hoping we're not going to really call it the Green Lady, but whatever. But it makes zero sense to me to fill that building full of people and then realize that we're going to have to renovate it and have to move 20 offices somewhere. It makes zero sense to me. It needs to be ready. We need to spend the next year figuring out who best should go in there and let them work with work with us to figure out what needs to be done to make the building ready. Moreover, what makes zero sense to me is to move a bunch of people in there when there is no way we can come up with a design and a renovation to make existing space from the area they vacated. We're not going to get the mezzanine. We're not even sure which walls can be removed, if any. There are utilities, some of them are load bearing. So it's not like if we move all of 20 offices out, that we're going to be able to create 3 committee rooms in there. It's not going to happen before January. It makes zero sense to move anybody out of here expecting it to provide us with usable space in this building by the next session.
Joe?
I'd only add to what John said, because I'm cognizant of the angst that the people who are currently in offices in this building have about being upset between now and January. They have a right to know where they're going to be. I did promise them that the conversation we had before we ended was the tip of an iceberg, and that they would have their concerns taken into account. We can't renovate the space that they are in to accommodate other committee space. Not in the time frame that we have in front of us. We should be confirming for them right now that while there may be a long-term situation that is completely different from where they are now, they have a right to assume that they are going to remain right where they are now, because we have no other place we can put them that makes any sense whatsoever. I agree completely with you, Ruth, that eliminates potential other areas that we have been talking about. But realistically speaking, we have no other choice because logistically it just cannot be done.
So yeah, I was not suggesting that that the answer to all the problems was to move ledge council out. What I was saying was, we've taken so many options off the table over the last few weeks. You know, we've taken off the option of moving staff out, we've taken off the option of discussing the ceremonial office and LG's office. We've taken off the option of moving committees out of this building. We've taken off so many options, all with good reasons. I mean, there are logical reasons for each of them, some of which I think are better than others, but they're all we all had reasons for them. But that still leaves us 5 committee rooms short. And so how are we gonna find 5 committee rooms and a code room and a space? So, if ledge council's not moving, then what about operations, ledge operations? If they're not moving, then, what about something else? So we just we've run out of space. And your solution about moving the ag room into Janet's room and then moving Janet into room 9 eliminates room 9 as a possible committee room.
Right.
And then it puts us in even worse position. So we have to put something back on the table in order to find the space, unless we have a wizard amongst us.
So let's go through this again, because I think we're in a little different spot than that. Anthony put out right before we took a break, the Senate Pro Tem and Senate Ag doing a flip. That was what Anthony put out. And we looked at the square footage, and there's more square footage in the current Senate Pro Tem's office than Senate Ag. So if we did that flip, you've taken care of Senate Ag, they're in a bigger room, you've found a use for Senate Ag room by putting this Pro Tem there. You have now 5 other committees that need space. We have said room 9, 10, 11, the lounge, and Ethan Allen are 5 committee rooms. That's where you put your committees that are going to have some volatile issues that are going to draw a lot of people. So hypothetically, you could move out House Gov Ops. You could move out House Education Committee. Those committees are then, those rooms are then opened up for the 2 committees in the 30s and the 3 committees in the 40s. You've solved that problem. We're looking at human resources and JFO. If we could find on a temporary basis for 2 Aiken, the commissioner's office for human resources, where you've got for the director, you've got an office for your assistant. If you bring in NCSL, you've got a large conference room, you've got that first floor on a temporary basis. We then figure out what we're going to do with 2 Aiken in terms of ledge council, so they can weigh in, because we want to make sure they're in a space that works and is safe for them. That's going to take some time, because if it gets moved, if they move to 2 Aiken at some point, it's at some point. It's not in January, because we need to do some work in that building. The minimum is get rid of the knob and tube wiring at a minimum. That's not going to even start to happen until next summer. And then the next question that we have, and I don't want this to be construed of moving ledge council out to get a coat room, but we have got to deal with trying to figure out where people are going to hang their coats. You can't expect people in the wintertime to keep walking over our carpets with mud and salt and water. It's got to be closer to an entrance and not up on the 3rd or 4th floor. So we've talked about Mike Ferrant really wanting his folks, needing his folks to be close to us. And we have talked about maybe Mike and his crew, 4 or 5 people, could move up to the mezzanine where the copying rooms, copying machines are on an interim basis. I don't know if that would work or not. And then that would free up the space where Mike Ferrant is right now for a coat room. because you're near the entrance. That's where we are. Allison, John, Janet.
So I think if the pro tem, I think obviously the pro tem we haven't talked about this with the pro tem, but if and Carolyn are agreeable, I mean, I think that is a very good solution temporarily. And I think one thought we could have is keep room 9 as the coat room. And if we're going to do the ag pro tem thing, we could have one shared Senate committee room. And that would, I know Joe's going to have a heart attack, but we all have to be flexible. And the plus of sharing a Senate committee room is that we could have the third, we could have the sixth, the fifth House committee move into that for a solution. So that is, I would put that on the table because we have a fabulous coat room already. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think the sergeant at arms needs to be absolutely as central as she is. And I think there are reasons that the police would like to stay where they are, which we will hear in executive session. But I think that if we do one shared Senate room, we could manage this and have the coat room. And keep the coat room. There is no reason for us to have to move anybody, I don't think, if we can keep the coat room as itself and make one Senate room swing.
Have you looked at it? It's not a code.
Could be.
That's easy
That's
to put.
easy.
What
The
would
coat
you
racks are all
use-
over the State House.
Yeah.
What would you use the vacated Senate room for?
Committee room.
For a
The
committee
House
room for the
committee
House.
Yeah,
Too
House
small.
committee room.
They're too
Yeah, they're
small.
small.
The
House-
smallest House committee is 8 members. The largest Senate committee
Is 7.
is 7.
I know.
So we're only exacerbating the problem. We're not curing it.
Except for airflow.
I think it would be great if the staff would weigh in because they actually have an idea about that.
I think we should have the chairs of the committee rooms that you are planning to vacate. Have their testimony.
The chairs, everybody's gonna have to work flexibly and be open for us to solve this problem. I don't think the chairs have I don't think people have ownership on their rooms here. I mean, it's a shared space. None of us have the luxury of owning our spaces.
Allison, I have to respectfully disagree with you.
Well, there you are.
But disagree, we must.
We're allowed to
You
disagree.
have to have those people whose work product may be impacted in explaining why that may be the case. Just as we have heard from Ledge Council, just as we have heard from staff, they have a right to come in and provide their testimony.
That would be every chair in the House and the Senate then.
Okay, let's move on. John and then Janet.
I think Representative Emmons did a great job of kind of explaining where I think we are. The piece that seems to be missing is the stuff that happens or used to happen in this room and in room 10. And I think that we have to also be considering the pavilion floor for joint committee meetings and for other activities. We can't forget about that because those are really important. I'm remembering so many different times when Senate Ag and House Ag got together in this room, and this room was full of farmers. And there's no way to do that in any existing room in this building except this one. And if we're going to give this up, we need to set something else. So let's not forget, we need to recreate this space somewhere by January.
And that's our discussion. And that's our discussion of how do we define overflow?
How open is the administration to letting us use the auditorium in the pavilion building? For that kind of a space?
I don't know.
We have
I don't know.
We have the
We have it.
second floor.
Yeah, we
available
have
to us.
109, we have the floor.
And we have the chambers that we can use more effectively.
Yes, we do.
We have space. We just,
have the
let's
space.
not forget that we need to include that in our planning.
Absolutely. It's on our agenda.
Janet?
So I did reach out to the pro tem and they are amicable to maybe going to Senate Ag and using the pro tem's room for Senate Ag.
That helps. That helps.
That's great.
So we have
So,
enough rooms.
Butch,
Yeah, so that, like, that would solve, that makes the swap, and then we'd have to fight our way and not use room, and not use room, still using room 9 as a committee room. Then we just have to fight our way through the code.
Yeah.
Piece as far as the legislature goes, and that's a much easier piece to solve than committee room.
Mhm.
So we could, that could be a topic of the next meeting, we'll fight our way through the code.
well, one thing I was wondering, let me interject John a little bit, is if Mike Ferrand and his crew could, and you know, we're in the building today too, and we could take a walk up there after the committee, just to see if it would be feasible to have you folks, Mike's folks, move up to the part of the mezzanine there, front part of the mezzanine where the stairway is, right up in there. I don't know if that's possible or not. But if we could kind of vet that between now and our next meeting. Or
Talk about it now, or?
if you can, that would be great. I think we can let JFO and Human Resources go. Please. Thank you for being sitting ducks for a while. And I don't know if we resolved your issues or not, but you might, Arlene, you might want to hook up with PGS with Joe and Eric and just see if that 2 acre space might work just for the interim for this next session. And see if that works. Yeah, we are. People don't realize that, but we are. So let's kind of just see moving you folks up to the front end of the mezzanine, if that's possible or not.
Sure. So Mike Ferrant, Director of Legislative Operations. I did hear that floated around the last meeting. And so before today's meeting, Charlene Dindo and I were in our office now. And I said, let's go take a walk and see these other spaces and where we might find ourselves most effective for the General Assembly. When we went up to the mezzanine, so there is open space in the top of the mezzanine that has desks for law clerks, for a new position that Ledge Council, I believe, has the authority to hire for, which is a paralegal, correct? And then they also have interns from BLS. Thank you very much. Mike is very helpful. But Mike was up there too, and we kind of talked about, and we looked at, and we said, well, where would we fit in with those other people up in this open area? And it really didn't work out. It didn't work out. No, so Charlene and I said, Charlene, let's walk the rest of the building, see what else might happen. And as I've listened to you go through what committee rooms are too small in the house, she and I had started thinking outside the box, and we looked at like house education. We looked at house agriculture, house corrections, smaller rooms that are, according to these standards, in need of new rooms. So if you take house education out of that room and put them into room 10 or wherever it ends up being, that frees up that room. And I think that room would fit my full staff very effectively and be centralized in the building and accessible to all members. It's up on the same floor as the Senate chamber, House chamber. Any of those rooms that get vacated in the 30s would work very well for us.
But not the smaller rooms, not house. You're talking,
He means, you don't mean house.
Yes, the new one,
The
right
new one.
on the corridor, on the way to the cafeteria.
You're talking about the smaller ones. Like corrections. Like.
Well, corrections, it's hard to imagine the room without the big table and furniture in it and putting desks into it.
But you were with me.
Yeah, you were in.
Talking about agriculture
Mhm.
and institutions, I think.
I was
30.
looking at those too, but we also looked at house education. I've heard numerous times that being mentioned as in need of a new committee room.
problem, yeah, but the
That's
problem
one
with
of
house
those we can-
education, you might have to move in like something like House Commerce Committee or House General, something like that, because they're in a smaller,
That's
like
one of the
House
bigger
General.
rooms we're gonna
So-
use.
That's the biggest room we've got.
Right.
That's one of the bigger.
So you'd be looking more at the smaller rooms.
So looking at those smaller rooms, I think that's something that we could explore and look into more of. I think when we walked up to the 40s,
It's too far away.
it's too far away. I can't imagine senators, for one, being comfortable all the way up in the 40s. I don't know if I've ever seen a senator up there in the 4 years I've been there. And not to offend anybody, but that's a travel. I think that the 30s or on the main floor is probably best, but we are a flexible group. We do, we have file cabinets because Charlene does accounts payable and receivable for the branch. We have Mariah and myself who house all of your personnel files, all of the legislative personnel files. So file cabinets, we would need 3 to 4 file cabinets in our space. We need 4 desks for the 4 of us. With doing accounts payable, receivable, and the admin functions that Mariah does, we'd need some ability to be quiet. So in the lobby, I think would be inappropriate, or something in the wide open for them. And then obviously, I think that the members need access to us. It's not so much that we need access to you, you need access to us. I field approximately 40 to 50 questions a day now through email, but in person, there was 40 to 50 people that would come to my desk asking me random questions, and I would not want to take that away from you. So that was what we kind of strategized through. Say again?
Those was me, right?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, I think I average about 120 emails a day
I think you
during the
should give a
session.
prize every year to the person who asks the most questions.
I do. You just don't know it.
He just doesn't tell us.
That person always gets a prize.
Michael, the filing cabinets that you are moving, do they include, judiciary has confidential files? Those included in the ones you have to move?
Right, we do have confidential files, yes.
Included in your estimated how many filing cabinets you.
Correct. How, in Senate Judiciary, you're saying? Or,
Well, judicial nominating, for instance.
Yes.
The retention has confidential files.
yes,
And assuming that those files are kept by you.
yes,
and they are included in the estimate of filing cabinets that you would need to.
that is correct. Between the legislative personnel files, judicial nomination, LCAR, accounts payable, receivable. And right now, we currently keep the Ledge Operations Council, NIT staff personnel files. Those are all confidential, and those all need to be locked.
Do they need to be accessible to you folks all the time, or could they be put somewhere else in a locked situation?
I'd have to think more on that. I'd have to think more. I'd have to get with Charlene a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We access the employee files, but Arlene and I had talked a little bit about migrating the staff personnel files to one central location with her, which makes a lot more sense too.
'Cause
So,
if you don't have the filing cabinets, if you don't need the filing cabinets on a daily basis all the time, if they could be put somewhere else that's in a secure lock situation, it might free up more space in one of those smaller committee rooms.
before answering, absolutely, yes, I'd want to check with them first. on
I don't
that.
know, just a thought. John and Butch, did you have something? No,
Well,
John?
before you came up, we have 5 rooms, if we, following the plan, we're in the direction we're heading, that are empty. And he's jumping in trying to claim one of them already, but.
Yeah, but if he moves, then we have that as a coat room.
Right. Which is,
But what I was wondering, would the 2 rooms in the 30s work for coat rooms, or are they too
no,
far?
Do you want people schlepping up through the carpet?
Just
Salt?
asking. So,
No way.
but we might have some options here, because is it possible some of the temporary Ledge Council people you were just mentioning could be in one of those rooms? Or can we use a couple of them for legislative lounges?
Yeah.
We've got 5 spaces
Yeah.
that we should make use of.
Right.
So maybe not the coat room, but legislative lounge, maybe the two rooms up in the 40s would be.
yeah, we've
set
talked
those
about
aside.
that. I mean, we've
Yeah,
talked about
we
the
could do
big
that.
swing rooms
Yeah.
or lounge.
And what about some of the offices that were just mentioned? Mike, who is coming in? Is it
A
temporary?
paralegal, and we have
Paralegals
clerks.
and temporary.
Uh-huh.
We normally put a law clerk in that space, but we haven't decided if we're gonna have law clerks. That discussion, that's still not.
So if we
So
use some
let-
of those spaces there, is
Yeah,
that too far?
Let's pick up a little bit of what John just asked about. In terms of, you've got paralegals coming in, you've got interns. What would it do to your system if? Because they're taking up the space that you could possibly move into. What if they were in the two committee rooms on the 30s, the two committee rooms that are opening up? Well, it would or would not. So we could put the interns or paralegals in one of those rooms.
But you have space for them already. I mean, they're in the mezzanine.
Allison,
That's
it's
what
to
we-
move Mike Ferrant's group
Nope,
up into that space.
Mike
If-
doesn't want that space. I heard you just say it was
He-
too open. And
There wasn't enough space to move Mike's operations up there because there are the paralegals and the interns. Correct?
Correct.
Do you not want to go into that? If that space was available up there,
Mhm.
would that work for you folks?
I think we could make that work, but as I listened to the conversation, so the paralegal and the law clerks and the interns work with the attorneys. I think keeping them co-located would be more efficient and
But I
make more
just
sense for them.
asked Mike O'Grady if they could be put into those two little committee rooms on the 30s instead of being in the mezzanine.
But depending on how many interns we have, one or two of them could occupy what we call Harry Potter. The others, depending on their schedule, would traditionally use that open space in the mezzanine. But we could move them to. It's not a problem. It's not.
Because I'm thinking if it's not a problem to move the interns, like what John just mentioned, it's not a problem to move those interns up to either my institutions committee room or the ag room across the hallway, then that would free up the space in the mezzanine for Mike Ferrant's crew to move up.
But
But which space is better for Mike?
I thought
the
Mike
mezzanine
said-
better or the?
I would-
or the-
I thought
I
Mike
would
said
think the
needed a
committee rooms in the
locked room.
30s would be better access for you folks, and it would also maintain the ledge council integrity of having access to their
Yeah, that's
law
fine.
clerks and their interns. Because otherwise, we'd be up in the mezzanine, and every time Michael Grady needed to talk to an intern about an issue, he'd have to leave the mezzanine, go all the way around to the 30s. I would think that us being in the 30s would be more accessible for you.
That's what I.
And
thought I
also
heard
work
you say.
more efficiently for the whole picture of things, keeping the law clerks and ledge council as close together as they can be. 'Cause
I think the 30s are better space, so if Mike, I think it's a better space for Mike.
And for Peggy, who supervises all the committee assistants, she has more access to go supervise her staff from the 30s as well.
And it's lockable, which is what I heard. I thought I heard you say that you wanted lockable space.
Just the file cabinets, just the file cabinets.
So Butch?
Thanks. So I agree that the place for the interns, et cetera, is up in the mezzanine. I'd hate to have an intern, not have them supervised, and make it easier for them to learn from you. And my concern with moving Mike into the 30s is not moving you and your personnel, it's the files. And I'm wondering, with some minor construction that maybe BGS could do, could we secure? I don't think we would need the whole area that we're in now for Copeland. And take some space out of that and make it a secure area for the files that could be left downstairs. That would be something you wouldn't need like access every day, but they would still be in a secure location. Oh, down on the end where you're going.
Down on the
to,
other end, near the
Where they
team.
currently are?
Yeah, you need some files with you.
Mhm. Yeah, I would want to check in with Mariah and with Charlene to see how
Yeah.
often they access them and need access to them.
I just can't get it in my head how many file cabinets I already have.
We currently have a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
And well, and drafting operations uses them as well. So we kind of share them in terms of, there's like a big bank of them down there if you look.
But it's more the question of those that are confidential and you have to,
Yeah,
Lock.
that's what I'm.
those are the ones that, do they have to move with you? The ones that you have to lock for confidentiality. issues.
Right, that's what I'd have to check in on.
Janet, then Allison.
You know, I would like, Mike, so, I mean, as far as like the confidential files or what you're keeping in, I mean, maybe that should be in the HR realm anyway, so that could alleviate some of the space for you.
Good.
There was that, and then I'm just also, we don't want to forget the IT needs for, if we did take over part of that space for the coat room, where Shaddy sits
Shaddy,
now, I
yeah.
think it's possible that he could still be there, and maybe we could put some sort of divider up. And as long as, if we're talking about this, I'd still like to revisit using that conference room across from your
Mhm.
desk, if that was the case, and still using that as a gender neutral bathroom. And Joe, I would ask you if, you know, what you know about the plumbing back there.
Don't know anything about it.
Okay. So that would be a question that if we could possibly get that done by January for my world. Well,
No.
it might be possible. I don't know. So I'll just throw it out there. It's a need we're gonna have. I'm telling, it's not comfortable for me when people ask for a single use bathroom. They shouldn't have to ask. And if we're doing a little bit of this to make that work, it'd make my life easier, and it's all about me. Joe.
Understand that, well,
Yeah.
isn't it always? It's never about me. I don't know, because, you know, you're starting to tear up concrete floors and like
Okay.
that.
Could it be
How to
worth-
design something like that, I could not say.
Okay, fair enough.
Could you spend a little bit of time looking at that just between now and when we meet again, just to get a little bit of an idea? So if you can look at that, and Mike, if you could figure out the confidentiality issues with the locked filing cabinets. And maybe, you know, work with Arlene. Some things may be more appropriate to be with HR. Maybe Butch's suggestion of the back end of your operation before it gets into Nadine's operation, maybe cordon that off a little bit if you need to keep the filing cabinets there. I don't know.
And then there's the other, operational things that we have in our office that members access quite a bit, the stationery, the
Right.
office supplies, the stamps, the cash register that Charlene keeps on her desk, and people come down for change to go use the vending. I mean, we get used for a lot of variety of reasons by you folks. And if we move, we would want to maintain that,
Right.
those uses for you. And so we just have to be cognizant of those spaces as well.
So would that be applicable to those one or two rooms there in the 30s?
I think so. I mean, I'd have to really look at the square footage of it, and we would need new furniture. Our desks right now are just gargantuan, heavy
Right.
things that we would probably want to get something more modern and sleek that's smaller and fits better in those spaces. But
And then
I think we could.
And then we could put the coat room in terms of where your operation is. This is all for the time being,
Right, all temporary.
all temporary.
Alice, did we make a decision about the copy room? And is
We-
IT taking copy over to 133?
You can't do it on 133 with
Because we
a
talked about
knob
that
and
last
tube.
time, so I'm just
Right.
curious where we are with the copy
I
room.
think the copy room stays where it stays for the time being.
Okay, because that was sort of an open question last meeting, so I'm just curious, that's been resolved.
Not my comment to make.
Well, sounds like it's been resolved.
John?
It can't go to 133.
I just want to explore, as you were just,
Can't just take more space.
as you were just talking about square footage. originally you were talking about house education, which is quite a bit larger than the room next to it. I
Sure.
just wanted- I mean, we need to make sure, because we're talking about moving one of those committees into where House Ed is now. That room in the current thinking is not available. So the room next to it is quite a bit smaller. So we just need to make sure the square footage
Yeah.
will be adequate.
Right,
Or you're gonna
right.
need both of them.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, and like I said, this was before today's meeting. We went up, we kind of looked at it. It's very difficult to determine with the current furniture in there, what it looks like empty and what other desks would look like in there, so.
So I'm gonna suggest that maybe Stephen might be able to work with you between now and the next meeting to figure out the space planning for those two rooms.
Mhm.
Just to figure it out.
Right. If
Are
could
you
do
good with that? No. Vacation?
Yeah,
I
really.
know, right? We can,
Okay.
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. So let's do that for next meeting. Look at those two spaces where my committee room is and where the ag committee room is now. Okay, and see how that would work out. Figure out your secure filing cabinet situation. And Joe, if you could look at that little conference room there and let council press in Mike's office about bathroom.
See if we can get water there.
Okay, it's the plumbing, it's the waste. We could do a non,
Oh,
we could do
the sewer.
compostable, compostable toilet. Thank you, Mike. So let's move on, folks. We're,
Matt?
Brought something up about shoddy. Kevin. Shoddy's schedule of moving to 133.
We can't move 133.
For a long time.
any Sooner than at least June of next year.
The whole operation.
There's nothing there for us yet.
there's nothing there.
Not even begun, we're still in planning phase.
Oh, I see. So Shoddy's sort of where he needs to be here, is what I thought I heard. So Madam
He
Chair,
doesn't have to have as big of a space as he currently has. We're moving things, storage and build space over. But he still needs to have a presence here for you folks to be able to find that.
Yeah, preferably a secure space though, because where he's at right now is not.
It's less than ideal.
Allison,
Madam Chair, I think we're inching towards,
we're doing stuff.
we're getting there, I think.
So we have two more things on our agenda.
Overflow.
State House building capacity to really establish a number in terms of what the capacity of this building should be. That will be a tremendous amount of help to both the sergeant at arms and the state and our Capitol Police, who he's coming up. I think he wants Janet next to him. No, you want a soft chair?
He's got
too much stuff on.
He's got
I can't fit in those.
Yeah, you never know when legislators are gonna get out of hand.
Anyway, I guess we're doing building capacity. So it's all yours, chief.
All right, Matthew Romeo, Capitol Police. And Janice, welcome to come join me. I just figured it would take her the rest of the day to get out from around the table, but so before I forget about it, if you turn that into a coat room, you guys figure out where to put the drafters. So,
No, they're gonna stay
No, they're
there.
gonna stay.
It's not the whole area,
okay.
It's just the beginning.
just the beginning of it.
Fair enough. I would love the idea of getting legislator coats away from public coats. While we're thinking about that, it's a great plan. So building capacity, we, as part of the COVID issue, started down the pathway of putting people counters in the building. And we currently have people counters over the loading dock door and over this door coming in off the link, what we refer to as the Lincoln Arch door. There's also another sensor above this end of the hallway. And the idea was that we could zone off this hallway to understand how many people are going into the gift shop in the summertime and how many people are in this room. The system that we chose with IT's guidance is infinitely expandable or nearly so?
Nearly.
Okay, so it gives us not only a total building capacity in a live sense, it also gives us footfall numbers. And so if we actually finished the system on the perimeter of the building, we could start having good numbers as far as how many people are in the building. And also, once we get a year or two or three or four down the road, we can start doing predictive predictions off of this. We can give numbers to the curator's office of how many people visit the State House and how many people are doing tours. Those kind of analytics that we actually really need to support a lot that goes on in here, to actually have, real data. The other side, from an emergency preparedness standpoint, is we can watch building numbers tick down. At the end of the day, if we're closing, we can start making staffing decisions based on when we see numbers come up and go down. We would have to complete the perimeter of the building in order to do that. And we figure it's 20,000 or so to do that. We're thinking it's right at 10 to do the east and west doors, because those are pretty easy. The equipment's fairly inexpensive. It's getting the wiring done is everything in this building. And then we would have to do some alternative sensors on what we call the Ledge Council art store, the one going into drafting operations, and the infirmary, because of ceiling heights and a whole bunch of technical stuff that they understand and I don't. What that does is if you go out and look on, Kevin could probably pull it up here real quick if we wanted to see it, but on our iPad that's on the podium right out there in the lobby, whatever officer is sitting there can actually watch our building capacity as the day goes. That is also possible to get granular as far down as room capacity. And they are actually using this system in commercial applications. You may have, just take for instance, the bathroom. There may be an iPad or a similar tablet on the outside of the wall of a bathroom that gets to yellow when it can take one more person, and then gets to red and says the building's full or the room's full. So you can get very granular like that. But I can tell you, we can't get that granular for January. I'll go ahead and put that out of the way. But looking at a total building capacity, we could certainly accomplish that. The front door is the hardest place to approach for one of these sensors. And just to give you an idea, we think it's going to involve cutting a hole in the floor of the Hall of Flags to be able to get something above the front door. We worked down through with, David's about to have another heart attack over there, with Tricia Harper, the architect that does a lot of the work with us, and tried to noodle through how do we get to here. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. I have no idea what that would cost. Now, once we can measure it, then we have to figure out how to calculate it. So, and Joe, stop me when I stop. Yeah, exactly. So, and I wish Representative Shaw was here, but I have, I've been trained in how to calculate a building capacity. I would never for the life of me try to take on this building because it is insanely complex. But just to give you an idea, you calculate a zone of the building based on egress, how many people can fit out the door. And so if we talk about the east door of the State House down by Senate Appropriations, we would take all the capacities of the Senate rooms down there, the Sergeant at Arms office, half of room 9, 10, and 11, all of the Senate chamber, all of the Senate balcony, the Senate offices, half of the house chamber and half of the house balcony. And we would figure out what all those held. And then we would figure out how many people, there's a formula for how many people can fit through that east door at a time. And it's based on the width of the door at the narrowest point.
So you're talking about an evacuation of the whole building.
That's how
If the
you end up
building had to be
calculating capacity,
evacuated.
is can you evacuate? So we don't have a front door. So when you think about a Walmart or a movie theater, they have traditional front doors. And when you come up with that building capacity, you have various limits. And one of the limits is how many people can fit through the front door. Because you can have no more than half of your building, your front door has to handle half of your building capacity. Because in a panic, people come out the door, they went back, they went in. Even though there may be a door right here to get out. And if you want a perfect example of that, the Station nightclub fire in Warwick, Rhode Island in 2003, that killed 100 and something and injured 200 and something. People died, and the videos of this fire are absolutely heartbreaking, because bodies literally stacked in the doors. And these were people that were within feet of an alternative exit and did not understand where they were and how to get out. This is why we harp on the evacuation drills so much with y'all, and knowing where you are and how to get out of this building. This building is a mess when it comes to evacuations because of all the doors. The other thing that we can get concerned about greatly in terms of committee rooms is the fact that the door is open to the inside. And you can look back to 1903. What was the place in Illinois? Iroquois. So in the fire service, we study sentinel events because they change what we do in codes, and then we save lives as we go forward. That was the fire that caused every fire door in America to open out, and panic hardware and those kinds of things. So when you look at these committee rooms, it's not so much that you have to allow for that door to swing open and to get clear. Senator Benning, you brought up the young lady that passed out in Senate Judiciary. It took us a few minutes to get enough people out of the room just to get to her. And that's a challenge when you're packed in like sardines. So we would love to see you limit your capacity of these tiny rooms. That's y'all's world as chairs, because the chair has supervision over the room. And as I understand the rules, and I will tell you for the benefit of the two gentlemen sitting behind me, I'm neither an attorney nor did I stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night, but the committee chair owns the room. And it's almost ruleless beyond that, as far as whatever the chair wants, the chair gets. So.
I don't think so.
Well, I said almost, but it basically comes down to, the more space you have in there. Now, you notice one thing I didn't talk about when we started, when I walked through the east wing of the building, is the hallways. Transient spaces are not calculated as part of your building capacity. Am I still okay so far? Okay. It's been a while since I went through Inspector 1. But transient spaces are not counted. And if you remember the last time we had a gun hearing in this building, I actually had the Deputy State Fire Marshal for our region come to the building that night, because we don't have a building capacity number. We have a number for this room. We have a number for room 10. We have a number for the House and Senate chambers. We have, what else do we have? We have some of the bigger committee rooms I think we might have, but we don't have a gross building capacity. And I'm not even entirely sure. I don't know that you could go down through code and figure one out. I think what we could do is we could sit down with somebody from BGS, and somebody from the State Fire Marshal's office, and somebody like in the industrial hygienist world, and we could talk about, we could build a capacity for the building. And the legislature could adopt it and say, we're going to use this number. Whatever that number is, whatever X becomes. I think we could come to something reasonable about that. And then it's entirely up to you guys to figure out what happens when you're full. We did think about doorknob hangers for your rooms that says, hey, we're full, scan this QR code, go to this link, and you can see the committee meeting. I think as long as you're going to live stream, as long as you're going to do things like that, that's a fairly easy lift to execute that part of it. The other thing I would remind you about when you're starting to talk about building capacity is if you're going to eat up this room in room 10 as a permanent committee room.
They're not permanent. They're
Well, no,
temporary for us
I
to
get it.
come
For
back
this
in
year.
January.
For this year, I got you. I'm sorry. So permanent in the sense of you're going to use it for a committee throughout the next legislative session or throughout 2022. You're losing two big assets. And I'm not entirely sure that we've really talked well enough about the assets that you're losing. Because the minute, and I know Senate Gov Ops did it a half a dozen times one year, when they were talking about something and it's like, oh, wow, we can't pack anybody else in here. Let's go down to room 10 or let's go down to room 11. I see you using these rooms like that. I don't see you picking up and going to 109. Additionally, the rooms in 109 are only in the 20s per room. So you're really not gaining what you gain from this room or for room 10. So just, I'm happy to
Well,
fumble my way through some questions.
all
if
right,
you
I
have
think,
them.
I think losing these two rooms, I know the House chamber would be available. And I would hope the Senate chamber would be available as well to pick up that slack. We need to do it in the building.
I hope.
John?
When you talk about building capacity, it doesn't really matter where the people are going after they're in the building. If they're coming in and dispersing throughout as opposed to some event in the cafeteria.
It does and it doesn't, because you end up putting a building capacity together by pieces. And so when you look at flow paths through the building of egress pathways, you end up calculating this egress pathway for a person way up in the top of the Senate balcony is going to go out the same door that someone in Senate Finance is going to. So as long as it's not blocked. So there's a lot of weights and measures and calculations, and I got a lot of this gray hair going through that class that taught me how to do that. And I would not want to approach this building at all. I think we could come to a number, but I also think that it goes back to somewhat what the state fire marshal told me that was here that night. Bless you. When you can no longer freely move through the space, it's full. So we can have a number, but there's also this judgment call that when you can no longer move down the hallway freely, it's full. It's probably a little over full, but it's full. Looking out to other states, we saw in Wisconsin, when they had that series of protests that occupied the rotunda. We talked to our colleagues out there and they had a mess of a time when it got packed and they couldn't move. They had an absolute mess of a time. I also think back to some of the events that we've had here that, that have unfortunately decided to take place outside of Senate Judiciary. And that can be quite a challenge. It can be even a challenge when the card room gets packed. And then we've got the cafeteria line backing all the way down the ramp. So the building does get wonky from time to time. So we start talking about zones of space. And the other thing, when we had that hearing that we queue everybody up to get into the House chamber, so it's somewhat fair, for a little bit of first come, first serve type things, and we keep trying to keep order in the chaos. Once we loaded the House chamber, downstairs was a ghost town, and except for this room in room 10. So to your point, it does kind of end up being a mass of people moving through the building, but it is quite the challenge, especially when you start talking about, do we have some number for the whole building?
Well, and my other question comes down to, you mentioned body counters. It wouldn't recognize a member from anyone else.
It
right?
can, it actually
Because you
can.
couldn't have a situation where we've reached capacity, no one can come in and a member can't get in.
So what we've thought about with that, and we have actually thought about that concept, is if we just using a number, if we use 500, and that would not be the number, we can certainly hold more than that, I get that, but if we use 500 as an instance, then what we would immediately do is back out 150 representatives, 30 senators, lieutenant governor. We'd probably back out 250 people and lower our threshold by that amount of people to guarantee members the staff that's required for the building and those kinds of things. You can get these fancy lanyards that will actually tell the counter not to count you. But I can't get y'all to wear your ID badges anyway. So I'm not sure how I would
I
get
mean,
you to
I'm
wear a
thinking,
lanyard.
if I walk out of the building, then it says, okay, someone's left, someone can come in, and then I come back.
And I think that's where we have to offset that.
You'd always, the
That's when we
numbers.
would take a vote, John.
Whether I come back-
So that then, is this something in terms of getting some ballpark number for for State House building capacity needed for us to come back in January? So,
I
'cause-
highly recommend it. Even if we have to adjust that number as we go and we learn more about what life looks like. I highly recommend
so
getting
can-
those extra counters because
the
it's pretty
time.
reasonable.
So can we do that right now with the current counters? Or are you saying we'd have to invest in some more counters on the perimeter?
We'd have to put the ones in on the east and west doors unless you were gonna keep them closed. And I think y'all want all the doors back open, if I'm not mistaken.
Would think so.
The front
You
door
have
is
to.
not usually open.
Right.
Not
the
during
front door.
session.
Yeah.
So usually open this time of year.
You gotta go. Okay, we're gonna set up, would next Tuesday work for folks for another meeting?
I'd have to Zoom, but yeah, we have to get this finished.
Yeah, next Tuesday. I mean, we've got to figure out our schedule. We didn't go beyond today in the afternoon, 1 to 5. Well, you can do that. You don't have to go with her. Can other folks do it? Next Tuesday, 1 to 5? Okay, 1 to 5 next Tuesday. But so for the building capacity, you could do some of it without investment. Because you already have the counters, but you don't have the counters at the east and west doors.
You don't have the counters at
So-
the east and west doors, and the infirmary, I think, is the other big, the high traffic number.
I thought you said the loading dock one had a counter,
We have one coming in the loading dock. We don't have one that goes into the infirmary door.
but nobody comes in that door.
A lot of folks do.
The infirmary door?
And they take that elevator up to the
Oh,
cafeteria.
okay,
goes
that's the
straight up.
elevator.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that goes
so
straight up.
what would the cost be for 3?
I believe we're around 10,000 to do the east and west and the infirmary door. It's the front door that will bring.
Well, the front door is not
challenges.
open during the session. The front door isn't open. Right. So is building capacity something the committee would be interested in looking at?
I think for me, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would help manage, particularly with COVID, or
Well,
if
that's
we're
what I'm
gonna,
Thinking, I mean,
Yeah.
it'd get us through the next year, see how it works.
The other
we
thing I
could make
was,
that recommend. What's the supply time, the supply chain for that, do you know?
pretty quick.
Okay.
It's not too terribly bad. It would be better to, of course, be better to tell them 2 months ago, but
I think the chief always talks about this, and I agree, and he talked about it again today, is when you set these numbers, it's not based on content of what's going on here in the building. It's
Based on the
it's
building. what-
Based on the building, because we don't want,
So how would we arrive at what that capacity number is for the State House? You'd
So-
have the counters, but how do
So
we
we
arrive
can
at
certainly
the
measure
number?
it, and what I think we would need to do is, I could probably sit down with, the State Fire Marshal's office has said they would absolutely help us figure this out. If that's some, they've always been told we didn't want to know it. It was a kind of
Right.
one of these things. So I think if we can get, I don't know, you got somebody in your shop that can sit down and noodle with us.
Farm it out.
I mean, if we sat down with the fire marshal's office, I think
Is
we
that
could
gonna
probably.
open up any other doors?
Or can of worms.
What do you mean?
Can of
Cans
worms?
cans of worms?
I don't
think
want to go
s-
down the can of worms. I'm
So
just-
I don't think so, and here's why. When I talked to Stan Baranowski, who is our deputy state fire marshal for this area now, when I talked to him, you can calculate capacity of a room. Let's just say your committee room. You can calculate it based on the square foot per person. And then you figure out how many people can get out the door, and you use the lower of the two numbers. And it's either, is it 7 or 15 square feet a person? Something like that, sounds right. And depending on what kind of space you're dealing with, whether it's assembly, business, governmental, all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing, with the amount of furniture that you have in your committee rooms, you will never reach the capacity that you can calculate on a square foot per person basis. So that's why in most of these exercises, you use a butt in seat number. And that's, when Janet and I went around and looked at the rooms, that's what we looked at, was how many people can we put in no standing room in these rooms? Because you tend to get into trouble in these committee rooms when you start packing folks in and they're standing up and they've created a ring around your table and it gets complicated. at that
So we've
point.
agreed to do the seating capacity within our committee room. So if you folks could work up maybe a number between the seating capacity in the committee rooms.
That would be great.
And, what's available in the common rooms, like the house can hold, what, 280?
300.
300?
Well,
I just would like to add, is like Mike or Brady, do you have any weigh in on any of this? From a constitutionally,
Terminations. I mean, what the chief is kind of outlined is pretty logical. There are decisions to be made.
So I was curious, I think you kind of fixed the capacity piece by fantasy seating committee rooms and stuff like that. But you mentioned the milling around factor. And I think of one night we have the public hearings on guns, for example. I mean, just corridors are all full, up, down, everybody, out, the non-public spaces are still part of capacity of the building, but there's nobody in it. So that kind of skews the whole thing. So maybe we could think a little bit, how do you control the milling around factor? I mean, I remember at the end of the year, when you're finalizing a budget down at Senate Finance, you can't move from here to there.
And that's what, when, then it was Glenn Moore. He was our deputy for the area. He was here one of the nights for one of the gun hearings. And he kind of looked when it got to where we couldn't effectively move from point A to point B, we were full. Now, I have received some pushback on you still can't close the doors. And I find that to be a little counterintuitive because I understand the doors have to be open, but I also understand that we lock the doors every night when we go home. So I think there's a common sense approach to that. And I don't think that the Constitution is a suicide pact. As far as, packing an unreasonable number of people in here where folks are going to get hurt.
I do think, which that we want to, I know we're not going by ASHRAE totally, but some of these spaces and hallways have no override of a capacity for air, that we're going to try to manage that a little better, get the word out that, you know, we're trying to keep people out of the places, but the, you know, in the cafeteria, in the back of the chambers, there's places for people to be. So.
I mean, and for the upcoming session, by taking away all these common rooms as committee rooms, now you don't have the capability in a big hearing night of setting up TVs and showing what's going on the House floor as far as testimony and that type of stuff. So that's gonna get more people milling around in the hallways and corridors.
But on the other hand, if it's available through Zoom, people might end
They
up
might
doing
just-
that
yeah,
instead of making it
Yeah, people
2-hour
who
trip.
aren't testifying to watch by Zoom.
Particularly at night. I mean, you know, when Civil Unions was at play here,
We heard
I've heard the
David
story.
remembers.
That was capacity.
That was more than capacity. It was more than it was probably 2 gun hearings put together in one.
We would
The,
still have the
um,
cafeteria too for
Yeah,
overflow.
that's where they were.
We'll have that, and you know, we can, not without complexity, but we can look into the Pavilion Auditorium for a display. Or the Snelling Room over in the History Museum
Right.
for a display. Again, not without complexity, but that can be explored. I do know, I think Mike was gonna look into things with the press conference. I expect the press conferences will be moved out of the pavilion soon.
Mhm.
You know, I certainly don't want to speak for that
Speaking for the
group,
governor right now.
not at all. I did run into him in the convenience store yesterday. That was very nice. But I expect that's going to free that room up soon. And, you know, again, it's, there's some complexities I'm happy to talk to in executive session, but we certainly could look into using some of that space.
So if you and Janet could just do some work on trying to figure out the building capacity here, not open up any can of worms with anything, but if you could do that and kind of report back next week, would be terrific. Looking at the time, I know it's after 5. Let's put off till our next meeting, the definition of the term overflow on 109 and 133. We're going to get a report back from Mike Ferrant about his space issues. He's going to look at those 2 little committee rooms on the 30s and look for a secure place for files. Joe H is just going to take a look about the conference room down at Ledge Council for the possibility of a bathroom for that. And then Janet and the chief are going to have further conversations about the State House building capacity and see if we can come up with something.
Sorry, what's that?
State House building capacity for that. So next meeting, we'll hear those reports, we'll hear the definition, we'll talk about the definition of terms on the overflow of 109 and 133. And that is the 27th of July. And our report, we need to spend some time, if we can, at our next meeting to go over with Michael O'Grady what we want in our report, our recommendations, because you're going to be leaving by August 6th.
So I've already mocked up a template.
Okay,
I have to do a little bit more work on it. But basically, you can add as bulleted inserts your recommendations.
okay.
So I've already started writing them up. I'll probably have something for sharing.
This week. Okay, because we've got to start working on that for our
Well, I think we
recommendations,
made a lot of movement today.
right? Mike,
Next week, do you want to meet in this room or do you want to try one of the other?
could we try room 10?
10?
We want 10 or the
I would
lounge?
try
I've already
one
got
of
a
the
committee
new
member
ones,
sitting
like,
around.
of like the lounge.
What did you say, Mike?
So room 10's committee tables are much smaller for smaller. So I don't know. if
Try the
there's a
lounge.
large group of people.
How about the lounge?
Do you want to do the lounge? We wouldn't fit in room 10? Okay, be tight. Okay, let's do the lounge.
Now let's try it out.
As a committee room.
Brave new world.
So and also you might want to pencil in maybe the next Tuesday after that, because we're not going to finish our work next week. I think Tuesdays has been working for people. Is that fair to say? If we could just kind of
Yep.
pencil this in, knowing that August 15th is not that far away.
Zoom in from Alabama.
It's very close.
Weekend.